And where was she, the latest dead, the Romanian countess who might have thought her blood would survive his depredations? I knew she must be here in the place that wound me through the castle towards it on a spool of inexorability, but at first I could see no sign of her. Then, for some reason, perhaps some change of atmosphere wrought by my presence, the metal shell of the Iron Maiden emitted a ghostly twang. My feverish imagination might have guessed its occupant was trying to clamber out, though, even in the midst of my rising hysteria, I knew she must be dead to find a home here. With with its sculpted face against the rictus of pain. Then, overcome, I dropped the key I still held in my other hand. It dropped into the foaming pool of her blood. She was pierced not only by one, but by 100 spikes, this child of the land of the vampires, who seemed so newly dead, so full of blood. O God, how recently had he become a widower? How long had he kept her in this obscene cell? Had it been all the time he had courted me, in the clear light of Paris? I closed the lid of her coffin very gently and burst into a tumult of sobbing that contained both pity for his other victims and also a dreadful anguish to know I too was one of them. The candles flared as if in a draught from a door to elsewhere. The light caught the fire opal on my hand, so that it vanished once, with a baleful light, as if to tell me the eye of God, his eye, was upon me. My first thought, when I saw the ring for which I had sold myself to, I retained sufficient presence of mind to snuff out the candles round the bière with my fingers, to gather up my tapper, to look around, although shuddering, to ensure I had left behind me no traces of my visit. I retrieved the key from the pool of blood, wrapped it in my handkerchief, to keep my hands clean, and fled the room, slamming the door behind me. It crashed with a juddering reverberation like the door of hell. I could not take refuge in my bedroom, for that retained the memory of his presence, trapped in the fathomless silvering of his mirrors. My music-room seemed the safest place, although I looked at the picture of Saint Cecilia with a faint dread. That had been the nature of her martyrdom? What had been the nature of her martyrdom? My mind was in a tumult. Schemes for flight jostled with one another. As soon as the tide receded from the causeway, I would make for the mainland. On foot, running, stumbling. I did not trust that leather-clad chauffeur, nor the well-behaved housekeeper, and I dared not take any of the for his creatures all. Once at the village, I would fling myself directly on the mercy of the gendarmerie. But could I trust them either? His forefathers had ruled this coast for 8 centuries, from this castle whose moat was the Atlantic. Might not the police, the advocates, even the judge, all be in his service, turning a common blind eye to his vices, since he was the milord whose word must be obeyed? Who on this distant coast would believe the white-faced girl from Paris, who came running to them with a shuddering tale of blood, or fear of the ogre murmuring in the shadows? Or rather, they would immediately know it to be true, but were all honour bound to let me carry it no further. Assistance. My mother. I ran to the telephone, and the line, of course, was dead. Dead as his wives. A thick darkness, unlit by any star, still glazed the windows. Every lamp in my room still to encroach on me. to be present beside me, but as if masked by my lights, the night like a permeable substance that could seep into my skin. I looked at the precious little clock made from hypocritically innocent flowers long ago in Dresden. The hands had scarcely moved one single hour forward from when I first descended to that private slaughter-house of his. Time was his servant, too. It would trap me, here, in a night that would last until he came back to me, like a black sun on a hopeless morning. And yet the time might still be my friend. At that hour, that very hour, he set sail for New York. To know that in a few moments my husband would have left France calmed my agitation a little. My reason told me I had nothing to fear. The tide that would take him away to the new world would let me out of the imprisonment of the castle. Surely I could easily evade the servants. Anybody can buy a ticket at a railway station. I opened the lid of the piano. Perhaps I thought my own particular magic might help me, now that I could create a pentacle out of music that would keep me from harm, for if my music had first ensnared him, then might it not also give me the power to free myself from him? Mechanically I began to play, but my fingers were stiff and shaking. At first I could manage nothing better than the exercises of Czerny, but simply the act of playing soothed me, and for solace, for the sake of the harmonious rationality of its sublime mathematics, I searched among his scores until I found the well-tempered clavier. I set myself the therapeutic task of playing all Bach's equations, every one, and I told myself if I played them all through without a single mistake, then the morning would find me once more a virgin. Crash of a dropped stick. His silver-headed cane. What else? Sly, cunning, he had returned. He was waiting for me outside the door. I rose to my feet. Fear gave me strength. I flung. My voice astonished me by its firmness, its clarity. The door slowly, nervously opened, and I saw not the massive, irredeemable bulk of my husband, but the slight, stooping figure of the piano tuner. And he looked far more terrified of me than my mother's daughter would have been of the devil himself. In the torture chamber, it seemed to me that I would never laugh again. Now, helplessly laugh I did, with relief, and after a moment's hesitation, the boy's face softened and he smiled a little, almost in shame. Though they were blind, his eyes were singularly sweet. "Forgive me," said Jean-Yves. "I know I've given you grounds for dismissing me, that I should be crouching outside your door at midnight, but I heard you walking about, up and down. I sleep in a room at the foot of the West Tower, and some intuition told me you could not sleep and might perhaps pass that. Besides, I stumbled over these," and he displayed the ring of keys I had dropped outside my husband's office door, the ring from which one key was missing. I took them from him, looked round for a place to stow them, fixed on the piano stool as if to hide them would protect me. Still he stood smiling at me. How hard it was to make everyday conversation. "It's perfect," I said. "The piano, perfectly in tune." But he was full of the loquacity of embarrassment, as though I would only forgive him for his impudence if he explained the cause of it thoroughly.